Shock, disbelief, and anger were the emotions running through me the morning of April 12th, 2012, as I sat in my office across from Special Agent in Charge for the FBI, Andrea Dobransky. She'd stopped by to see me that morning around 8:30. And when I woke up that morning, it was like any other morning. I got up at 5, got to the gym by 5:30, worked out at the police department, got up to my office, and just like I'd done for most of my 4 years to that point as police chief. And Andrea popped up onto the 3rd floor and knocked on the door and asked if I had a minute. And I thought it was a little odd, but we were friends and thought, well, maybe she's passing through. And then she said, "Is it okay if I close the door?" I was like, whoa, what's going on? So she closed the door and she sat down and she let me know that her agents were at City Hall executing a search warrant and arresting our comptroller, Rita Crundwell. When she met with me, she was a little unclear about the amount. She said that it was at least $1 million or over $1 million. By the time it was all said and done, it became the largest municipal embezzlement in the history of the country. She had stolen more than $54 million over a period of 20 years. After meeting with Andrea, I called my lieutenants in and said, "We got a problem." To give you a little background, at the time we were a commissioned form of government. We didn't have a city administrator. We didn't have a city manager. And in a commissioned form of government, each elected official, there are 5 of them, 4 commissioners and the mayor, were in charge of different departments. So we didn't even have a strong mayor form of government. And so that right away created some different issues and problems. Immediately we recognized the fallout was going to be incredible. It was going to be horrific. People were going to be lining up at the doors of City Hall wanting to burn it down. And as we sat there, there's a value that I'd lived by for quite some time that just overcame me. And that is, when all else fails, lead. As the police chief with the resources of the police department, we were in the best position to step up and to take the lead. And so I immediately started calling elected officials, asking them for meetings. I touched base with the mayor briefly, but he was very busy at City Hall, and I began to bring them up to speed on what had happened. And I asked them something very, very important. No matter what your urge or what you're feeling or what your emotion is, please do not talk to anybody about this until we can get some more information. It is absolutely critical that our city team hear about this from us and that they don't hear about this from other sources, and it's critical that we define and get this message together. So through this process, and what I want to talk about today are really the 5 key and critical components of this crisis leadership experience and things that I think will transition well. A crisis doesn't have to be a $54 million embezzlement. It can be a breach of data from your local hospital. It can be, an abuse of sexual abuse or sexual misconduct from somebody on your team. It can be an accusation of discrimination. There are many different things. And when we look at crisis, we're not just talking about things that cause significant injury or significant property damage. We're talking about our brand, things that threaten our brand, things that threaten the foundation of what makes us who we are and why people come to us, and that is trust. And in government, trust really is the foundation of everything, because without the support and trust of our community, it jeopardizes the legitimacy of the government. So these 5 critical components are established command, one-voice leadership, proactive communication, immediate signs of change, being future-focused, and finally, consistency and time. Now, I will share this PowerPoint in a PDF. If you're watching on a phone, you might have trouble seeing some of the words, but that's okay. I will share this with you as we move through this. So when we talk about establishing command, somebody has to step up and take control and take charge. Again, very difficult in our form of government. Ideally, as Melissa would teach through your crisis ready community, you need to be crisis ready. You don't need just to have plans on a shelf. People need to be trained across all levels of the organization. Well, in this very fragmented form of government, we had a fragmented team, not a very good culture, lots of silos. So by no means were we crisis ready. So we needed to establish right away who was in charge. And in this case, I reached out to the Public Works Director and shared some ideas, asked him his thoughts, and he wanted me to take that lead role that initial day. And so we established that. The council turned and looked to us. The next thing we need to look at is, what are the greatest threats? Okay, and so the greatest threats, one of the greatest threats was, how are we going to pay our bills? We are in horrible financial shape. And there were some other factors, and we can talk about in the question and answer as to why that wasn't abnormal. A lot of communities were, right? She'd stolen $54 million from us. We've got roads that are run down, equipment that's wore out, not enough staff, safety issues, all of these different things are going on. But really in that moment, right, in that moment, the biggest threat was losing the trust of our team and losing the trust of our community. Key stakeholders. The key stakeholders in this case were the community, were our team, and were the council. You see, when you have elected officials, and anybody in government knows, that can be a little tricky. And we had good people on the council. And fortunately, when we talk about building our brand, one of the things the police department had done very well under my predecessor, and one of the things that he taught me, is community engagement, building a brand, proactive communication. So not only had we done that with the council and other key city leaders, we had done that as a police department with the community. In my thesis, Community Satisfaction with Police, we actually had a 93% approval rating from our citizens, well above the national standard. And that had been built before me. That wasn't me. I was able to come in and continue that. And then what are the impacts going to be, right? And so when we think about the impacts of this, you know, there's a lot that needs to happen day to day in a city to provide for our community. And we got to make sure our team is in the mindset and in the framework to do that, right? We got to know how they're going to react. We got to think about how they're going to be feeling, and we got to create the best environment we can to continue that. And then we also have to prepare, because we know the next meeting, the council is going to be packed. We expected people protesting in the street, picketing, all of those things. So that's the established command component of it. I'm a big mindset person, right? And champion mindset and growth mindset is something that we have to fully embrace when we step in and lead in these situations. Challenge equals opportunity. And boy, was this a challenge. But it was an incredible opportunity in so many ways. And one of the things that I believe to my core is, the greater the challenge, the greater the opportunity. So let's take a look at what our city team was feeling. Loss of confidence in city leadership. It was very low anyway. The divide between City Hall and the rest of the departments was very, very bad. They felt betrayed. They were concerned for their job. Lots of insecurity, fear. They were mad. They were outraged. They were embarrassed. A few people had actually raised some concerns on our utility side, our water, wastewater, and were just kind of shunned and pushed away because Rita Crundwell was trusted to such a high level. Disbelief. Let's take a look at the council and what emotions they were feeling, right? Because this is going to set up these emotions, and understanding the emotion is something that's going to set up our proactive communication. They were at a complete loss at what to do. It was thoughts of self-preservation. They felt like a failure. They were betrayed. A few of these council members had worked with her for 15 years. Disbelief, embarrassed, they felt guilty, and they felt like, we got to do something right now. And what we encouraged them to do right now was pause, take a breath, take a step back, right? And let us help them figure out what the next steps forwards are. So the community, a mob mentality, to say the very least, anger, outrage. Imagine, one of the things we all complain about is the amount of taxes we pay, right? And so if $54 million was stolen from Dixon and we were still operating as a government, they have been overpaying and they want a refund. They want their taxes lowered. And there was this feeling, the captain's got to go down with the ship. There was calling for resignation from the mayor, from the council, and it was brutal. But as we sit here, still in this kind of established command, assess the situation, what are the greatest impacts, how are people going to respond? These are all very, very predictable things, and we have to be thinking about them because our words are going to be coming soon. And the words that you can never use, especially in a situation like this, are no comment. That's just not going to work. That's going to fuel the fire. So the second component is one voice leadership. I am a huge fan, advocate of one voice leadership. It's actually something that we require in our expectation statements of our entire leadership team. If you don't speak with one voice, there is no way you're going to build trust. There is no way you're going to unify. What's going to happen is you are going to divide. You are going to create uncertainty. You are going to create dysfunction. All things that we didn't want to see here. So as we look at this and the speaking with one voice and the idea that we're one team, that became really tough because right away the mayor was talking about, I'm going to be the spokesperson. And right away other council members were like, I don't know, Mayor, we don't think you've got a great brand. We don't know that you have the trust. This has been going on under your entire watch. And so we had to talk to the council members, share the one voice leadership concept, get buy-in that we would assist in creating the messages and they would be able to see the messages and then be able to move forward. And I will say that this council did an incredible job of speaking with one voice and following this. And it made all the difference in the world as we step forward into number 3, proactive communication. Knowledge is power, communication is key. When people don't know, they will make it up. And have you ever seen somebody who was unsure about a situation and had some fear and was angry, make up something in their mind that was better than the situation? No, not at all. Everybody at City Hall is in on this. There's no way she could have done this alone. The accusations and the things that were out there were huge, so we needed to identify what our message was. This proactive communication, several key things. We've got to meet people where they're at. In today's world, you better have a great Facebook presence or an Instagram or a Twitter, and you can't just have one, right? Because the millennials aren't on Facebook, right? You got Gen X on there. I mean, some are, but Gen X, the boomers, they're going to be on Instagram. They're going to be on Twitter. And so we got to understand where they're at. We can't just rely today on our local media, on the TV stations. And believe me, there were plenty of those. And in a situation like this, people are going to go there, but you never know what story they're going to tell. Back in 2012, we were still very early in the creation of our Facebook. The city didn't have one. The police department did. It's nothing compared to what it is today. But we got to understand at that time, the newspaper, the media, special meetings, in-person opportunities for people to talk and ask questions is how we met people where they're at. But that is much different today. The second is transparency. You have to be able to be completely honest with everything it is that you can say. Once something like this happens and trust is destroyed, if people don't feel like we're being honest, the chances of rebuilding trust, they're not there. We've got to be transparent. We've got to provide accurate, detailed information. And we'll talk about how to do that second. We got to demonstrate empathy. So I showed you those slides. The city team, right? The council, the community, how they're feeling, and understanding, putting ourselves in their place is essential to create these strategies. One of the first things we set up on the morning of April 17, 2012, was an all-city meeting. There had never been one before. The public safety community room was packed. Myself and our Director of Public Works, Sean Ortgiesen, stepped up, presented, told them what we knew, and told them we would keep them up to date and put systems in place through future full group meetings, through communication to their department heads, and through email updates. We promised them that if something big was happening, they would know first. And we let them know how important they were. And we let them know how we were feeling. Somebody said during the meeting, man, it's like getting punched in the gut. And Sean Ortgeese, our public works director, who was very, very close to Rita, he said, no, it's not like being punched in the gut. It's like being shot in the head. When you have leaders step forward to lead in these situations, and they understand your emotion, right? And they connect through their emotion and show their humanism, you're more likely to unite. And then when we talk about our love for Dixon, that Dixon's a great community, provide hope, provide positivity, and provide belief that we will move forward and that we will make it through this and come out stronger on the other side, we give something for people to look to. And we said, if you love Dixon like we do, and we know you do, right now we got to pull together for Dixon. So we created a higher purpose for our team members to pull together and work towards. Unite through purpose, we just talked about that. We did similar things with the community and the community messaging and established common themes. So let's talk about these themes that we created for this situation. The first one, and I said it 1,000 times over 2 years, is we are going to professionalize every aspect of city government. The second thing we did is began working with the Illinois Policy Institute, which is a watchdog group, and they have a transparency project that's really through the website and website creation and sharing of information and putting more out in your agendas and changing the formats of meetings. So we committed to the transparency project and gave frequent updates on that project, in addition to the frequent ongoing updates through regular special council meetings and a lot of proactive news stories. Like, we were writing the stories, meeting with the local newspaper, meeting with and sending that to the TV stations. We're covered by two networks, really, or two areas. So the Quad Cities and Rockford, and they have all the networks. And so we're proactively, as we're doing things and making progress, getting that information out. Another priority and theme, we are going to recover the stolen money. We are going to do everything in our power to get this money back. The truth is that we didn't have the right financial controls and systems in place. Our council used to be very proud that our town could do with 3 people what the city of Sterling did with 10. Well, when you don't have the right internal controls, things like this happen. But there were things that were in place. The accounting firm actually handled part of our finance and finance structure. They did the audit, which was confirmed through another finance firm. And then there were some controls with the bank. And I can get into it later, but at the end of the day, within a couple of years, we received a $50 million out-of-court settlement from the bank and the auditors. Thorough investigation. We were quick to point out in our messaging that we found this, that we contacted the FBI immediately, and that we worked with them through this 6-month period. We talked about being committed to a thorough investigation, a thorough internal investigation that would not conflict with the FBI's investigation, and that anybody with any responsibility to this would be held responsible to the fullest extent of the law. When you think about it, that is what people want to hear. That's what they want to know, and they want to know this is happening. We hired finance consultants, top-of-the-line finance consultants, proactively communicated that in the structures that were changing, and then we created a form of government committee, which ultimately led to the change in form of government from the commission form to the city manager form, and today I am the city manager here in Dixon. The next component is that we must demonstrate change. We must demonstrate immediate and visible change. We need change in leadership. We need change in council meeting structures, simple things like the way agendas are done, community engagement, and in the finance department. And it really is an honor that the council, as we got together and we met and we do what we need to do, tapped me on the shoulder and asked me to step forward and help lead. And This broke on April 17th, Tuesday morning. Wednesday evening, we had a special council meeting. And they had me in my uniform. I gave the introduction. I set up the ground rules. The mayor gave a statement. We took some questions. But there was visible sign of change from the police department and the leadership that was very trusted and very respected. It didn't restore everything, but at least gave people a chance to pause and say, okay, we see that change there. Council meetings. Now at council meetings, the public works director and I would be part of that meeting. We would sit in a different location. We would give reports. We would give updates. Council meetings used to last between 5 and 15 minutes. It ties into the agendas that you look at them, you have no idea what these codes are or what's going on. So we created a more expansive agenda item so people knew what it was, and we created a supplemental agenda so people knew what was going on. Proactive community engagement, and began those changes in the finance department. So we went from doing things the old way to everything is changing, going the new way. I believe that the best way to predict the future is to create it. Leadership is all about creating the future. There's so many challenges facing our world today, so many different crises. But we look at the challenges just facing the world today, right? Food insecurity, social justice, the pandemic, poverty. When you look at issues facing business and recruitment and retention and employee loyalty and employee well-being and supply chain issues, demands and how customers receive their goods, there's so many things that are challenges, and all of them are answered and overcome and accomplished through leadership. And so really, when we think about our organization today and we have a vision for where we want our organization to be, we can create that, not ourselves, right? We got to create great, inclusive cultures, high level of engagement, high level of ownership, developing leaders through every level. If we'd have done that prior to this, we'd have had that high community trust, still would have been shattered. We'd have had that high team trust, still would have been shattered. But it's easier to move forward, and it's easier to be ready when crisis strikes. So think about what it is in your organization that you want to do and you want to create and work towards that. And for us, we did. We wanted to professionalize every aspect of city government. We wanted to go from being the laughing stock of municipal government to the gold standard, right? We wanted to take the monies and the structure and get this money back to put back into our community to make Dixon the great community it is today. And 10 years later, it is. We have created that future. The last thing that I want to talk about is consistency and time. I got a quote here. Some of you can read it, some of you can't read it. When I became police chief in 2008, it was a shock to a lot of people. A long-standing member of the department was expected to get the job. The department, there was no one-voice leadership. There was no accountability. It was really fragmented into two teams. And so my gift after becoming police chief was, one, the mayor coming out against me publicly and trying to stop it, and two, a vote of no confidence that failed narrowly. It was 15 to 14, somewhere in that game. So that's what I faced. And at that time of crisis and personal crisis and stress and challenge and adversity, my great friend Steve Howell, who's the police chief today, said to me, Danny, don't sell it, just do you. And I think that is so important now than ever, because what we're talking about essentially with our team and trust, with our community and trust, is relationships. And you can't force relationships. In fact, the harder you try, sometimes the harder it is that we push people away. And so we have to just do what's right. We've got to follow these steps. We got to be committed to the process, be open and transparent. But as soon as we start to sell, people get that, and then you lose all your credibility. And I followed his advice, implemented several strategies in our culture shift, and within 6 months, it was crazy the direction that we were headed in, unified as one department. So consistency and time, we can't force it. It's going to take years. It took us years to get to where we are today, right? Doing things consistently over time. So depending on what it is you're facing, There's no golden pill or golden nugget there. I'm going to finish with this. Crisis and tragedy do not define us. It's how we respond to crisis and tragedy that make us who we are today. Dixon is an incredible example of this. As we approach the 10-year anniversary of this embezzlement, Dixon has been featured in the Center for Governmental Studies NIU magazine on how to create rural thriving communities. We've been featured at state and regional conferences and really been looked at that gold standard. We now have, after paying off $20 million in bad debt, stopping the bleeding of money going out from one funding source for infrastructure and putting it there, we now have $15 million in reserves, cash reserves. We won $20 million in grants over the last 2 years. We're expanding the city. We've got riverfront and interstate development, and we've got such an incredible culture. And now we are proactively telling our story, driving tons of community engagement each and every day to build that brand proactively. So no matter what the situation, if we can insert that positivity, that hope, that belief, those strategies, and stay to them, and always be committed to excellence in everything that we're doing, there is light at the end of the tunnel.